The sun was coming in through the window of my office, casting shadows over the wooden floors. I was admiring the latest blueprint from one of my projects, the Morrison house, when my phone buzzed. It was a text from my wife. She did that sometimes, checking up on me, telling me how much she loved me, and so on. But this text was different. I already miss you. Last night was amazing. Until next time. See below. That was the response, which I wasn't meant to see. You're awesome. Up for another round tomorrow night? DG. I stopped just as I was about to touch the screen. DGI recognized those initials. It was our neighbor, the one who had borrowed our hedge trimmer. I sat down in my chair. Jonathan? My assistant's voice says over the intercom. Your 3 o'clock is here. I press the button, and to my surprise, my voice is calm. Tell them to come an hour later. I need to take care of something first. Yes, Mr. Fisher. I stared at the messages for a long time, trying to go back and find something that would change what I'd seen and heard. But it was all there in black and white. She'd been having an affair for weeks. My phone rang. It was Cecilia. I didn't pick up and let it go to voicemail. A few seconds later, she sent me a text message. Oops, wrong number. Can you disregard that last text? I hesitated for a moment, then typed out a single-word response. Okay. I put the phone down and stared out the window at the street below. Everything was so orderly, so perfectly organized. It was the only way I could stand to live. The phone buzzed again and again. I ignored it. Instead, I found Rebecca Mills' number in my contact list and called her. Rebecca Mills, a woman's voice says. Hi, this is Jonathan Fisher. I'd like to book an appointment. 1 second, Mr. Fisher. She waits for a moment. Miss Mills is available tomorrow at 9 a.m. Does that suit you? Yes. I hang up and look at my calendar. I've got a lot of things coming up in the next few days. Tonight we're supposed to go to a fundraiser at the art museum. My phone buzzes again and I look down at it. It's a text message from Daniel saying, wrong number earlier. Sorry about that. I laugh to myself. Sorry about that. What a fucking understatement. I decide to record a message for him and take out my voice recorder that I use for site visits and press the record button. Thursday, September 15th, 2:47 p.m. Discovery of what may be an affair between Cecilia Fisher and Daniel Grayson. Text messages. I keep talking, giving dates and times and little things that now made sense, such as longer than usual goodbyes and extra friendly conversations at the local coffee shop, and the fact that Daniel had been staring at her a lot. Someone knocked at my door. Come in, I say, turning off the recorder. She handed me a manila envelope. It's the drawings for the Eastwood project. They need your signature. Thank you, Sarah. I accept the envelope, surprised that I'm not trembling at all. Can you cancel my appointments for tomorrow morning? I'll be seeing someone? Yes, Mr. Fisher. And should I call Mrs. Fisher about the museum? I hesitate. No, let's stick to the current plan. After she leaves, I stand up and look at my reflection in the window. I look the same as I did this morning. My eyes are calm and collected. My face is as ordinary as it gets. Behind me, the city is as normal as it gets, but it's a lie. I take the phone out of my pocket and write a text to Cecilia. I can't wait to see you tonight. Wear the blue dress. I hit send and put the phone back in my pocket. It's her favorite dress. It's the same dress she wore the day she met Daniel for the first time, at the party we arranged for him when he moved into the neighborhood 6 months ago. I grab the recorder on the desk and put it in my pocket. Then I start gathering my things. My blueprints are soaking in the sun on my desk. The shadows have moved. Everything is the same, but still a little different. That's what I love about architecture. It changes as the sun moves across the sky and the shadows stretch and shrink. It's always the same and always different, just like life. And just like life, the key to success is to plan for those changes. And I always plan. I drive home from work. It takes longer than usual. It's Friday and the traffic is heavy. I leave my car outside the house and take a cab back to the office. It feels strange to be back. It's only been 2 hours since I left, but it's like I'm walking into a parallel universe. The words on the page were beginning to blur, making it difficult to concentrate. I stared down at the architectural drawings on my desk, trying to follow along, but the lines and numbers were swimming in front of my eyes. The sunlight streaming in through the window was too bright, casting shadows across the paper and making everything look three-dimensional, just like my marriage. Mr. Fisher, my assistant said, poking her head in the door. The contractor for the Westbrook site is online too. He needs to ask you about the foundation. Just tell him I'll call him back in an hour, I hear myself say. Are you sure you're okay, sir? You sound a little... I'm fine, Sarah. Just busy, I reply. She hesitates before nodding and leaving the room, carefully shutting the door behind her. Once she's gone, I pull out my phone and look at some of the photos I have of Cecilia. I find one from a gala we attended last summer. She's wearing a green dress and looks stunning. I used to love that smile. Now it just looks fake. She was with Dan even then, wasn't she? Sir? My secretary's voice came through the intercom. Sure, let him in. I fix my tie and put on my best. I'm not at all freaked out by this demeanor. Mark looked at me as he came in. You look like you just saw a ghost. Some surprises with the foundation. I point to the seat in front of my desk. Problems? Nothing to do with the job. I pick up some sheets, trying to keep them between us. The variance paperwork, did you bring it? He put a folder on my desk. Everything's there, but are you sure you want to go through this right now? We could always do it another time. Now's good, I ask, scanning the paperwork but not actually taking any of it in. How long have you known Daniel Grayson? He looks at me surprised when I ask him that question. Daniel? We've met at a few parties. I think Cecilia said they're both in the same museum board now. She did? I say, signing the paper. She never told me that. He readjusted himself in his seat and said, Jonathan, is everything. Setbacks are fine. I slapped the folder shut. Anything else? He stood up, sensing he was being dismissed. No, that's it. If you want someone to talk to, though. Thanks, Mark. I'll get Sarah to email you the updated plans by Friday. Once he is gone, I retrieve the recorder again, lowering my voice a little. Appendix to note number 1. Mrs. Fisher is a board member at the museum. How often do they have meetings or other events? My phone vibrates. It's a text from James. Are we still on for tonight? I text him back. Of course. I go back to the blueprints of the house, trying to focus on them. I couldn't afford to make a mistake. If I did, the house might collapse. I couldn't stop thinking about my own home, though, and how it had already collapsed. I just hadn't noticed it before it was too late. Sarah's voice was heard through the intercom again. Mr. Fisher? Mrs. Fisher is here to see you. My heart was pounding, but I tried to remain calm. Let her in. Cecilia entered the office. She looked beautiful, wearing the perfume I had bought her for her birthday. Honey, I was thinking we could eat early before the fundraiser. She smiles like she always does. You haven't been around much these days. I studied her for a second. Have I been doing that? I didn't realize it was disturbing things. Not problems exactly? She's sitting on my desk again. I just miss you. Funny you should say that, I say, looking at my phone. After your text. She looked a bit pale at that, but didn't flinch. Oh, that was just a misunderstanding. I was talking about a charity event with the museum board. Don't... His voice interrupts her, sharp and clear. I know what those texts were for. She stood up, straightening her pants. Jonathan, you're emotional. Let's talk about this at home. We can talk about it at the gala, I say, returning to my plans. And please, make sure you're in the blue dress, just like they asked. We wouldn't want to let them down now, would we? She approached the door, her tone harsh. You're being mean. Am I? I thought I was being specific. That's my whole thing, right? Measuring things. Angles. I look at her. Patterns. She left without saying anything else. I sat down and turned on the recorder again. Addition to previous entry, confrontation occurred at 4:15 p.m. Subject denied accusations and turned them around on me. Further analysis needed prior to meeting with Rebecca Mills tomorrow. It was later in the afternoon now, and I needed to get ready for the fundraiser event I was going to that evening. I stood up and got ready to leave. I needed to keep the pretense of everything being normal. It was important for a number of reasons, and it would help me get the information I needed to resolve this situation. The drive was slow going since it was raining by this time and everyone was stuck in traffic. The event went well, and I left earlier than I had told Cecilia I would. I wanted to see if she was home yet, or if she would be out doing her errands until later. Maybe I'd catch her coming back home, since I knew she wasn't going to the grocery store or even to see her friends. On the way home, I feel like a robot on autopilot, but somehow I make it there. Our home comes into view, the architecturally designed masterpiece I'd built a few years back. It had been my dream house, but now it feels like a movie set, like a stage for a play that I'm a part of. I park in the driveway instead of the garage, since I don't want Daniel to hear me coming in. But he's not even home yet, I realize. His car isn't in his driveway. I get out of the car and grab my briefcase from the passenger seat. Then I hear my wife's voice coming from inside the house. "You're the worst," she says playfully. "No, I can't." "Okay, sure." I open the front door and tiptoe inside. My wife is still talking as I walk quietly towards the living room. "The blue one, yeah. He's the one who asked for it. Can you believe that?" I grip the handle of my briefcase. The living room, decorated with designer furniture and expensive art, came into view. My wife, Cecilia, was on the phone, talking animatedly. "It's too perfect," she says, still not noticing me, almost like he's giving himself to us on a silver platter. I made a small sound in my throat, and she turned around quickly, lowering the phone from her ear. She smiled at me, but I could see she was sizing me up. "I gotta go," she says. "I'll see you tonight." She hung up and put the phone away. Then she turned to me and said, "Darling, I didn't hear you come in." Clearly. I placed my briefcase on the console table, watching the sun filter through the window and fall half on her face. "What were you chatting about?" "Committee meeting for the fundraiser tonight." She walks over to the bar cart, pouring herself a drink. "Drink? I'm good." I stay where I am, noting how she always finds a way to keep the maximum amount of distance between us. "Is Daniel on the committee?" She stopped reaching for a glass. "Why would you ask that?" "Professional curiosity. I've been getting into architecture of sorts. Load-bearing structures, points of stress, failure modes." She poured herself a drink of scotch and turned back around. "You're still mad about that? I told you it was a mistake." "You mean like joining the museum board but not telling me? Or getting coffee with her every Tuesday when you're supposed to be at yoga?" She stops the glass at her lips, staring at me with sudden shock. "You've been following me? Call it a site survey, information gathering, contingency planning." The glass shook slightly in her hand. "You're starting to scare me, Jonathan." "No?" I go to the windows, taking her place. "Maybe you never knew what I was like. Maybe that was part of the problem." She put her glass down. "If you have something to tell me, then just tell me." "I think I already did, earlier, in my office. But you seem to like playing games now, sending messages, arranging clandestine encounters, leaving clues." "I don't know what you're talking about." She walks to the stairs. "I'm going to get dressed. Don't forget the blue dress. There are a lot of people who'd be upset if you wore anything else." She stopped on the first step and turned around. "What do you want?" "What do I want you to do? I want you to go upstairs and get changed into that dress. I want you to put on your makeup and do your hair. I want you to play your role exactly as you always do." I look at her directly. "And then I want you to pay very close attention to what happens next." She hesitated for a moment, looking a little scared, then said, "You're making a plan." "I'm an architect, Cecilia. I know how to plan for things." I grab my briefcase and make my way to my office. 7 o'clock for the museum. Be ready. I close the door after her and hear her steps as she walks down the stairs. I open my briefcase, take out the recorder and a notepad, and sit down at the desk. I start writing. Thursday, September 15th, 5:45 p.m. On the phone with DG talking about plans for tonight, matching outfits, etc. Thunder can be heard in the distance outside. It will be a stormy night. I keep writing, making plans, and detailing each step like an architect plotting out a building. I can hear Cecilia hurrying around upstairs, getting ready for her performance. The stage is set. The actors are in position, and I've always been good when it comes to demolitions. The late afternoon and evening go by quickly as I write, study, and document. The thunderstorm outside gets closer and closer, and by the time it gets dark, it's right on top of us. The museum visit goes exactly as planned, and when we return, I'm back in my study, doing what I set out to do. The thunderstorm has returned, both inside and outside of my mind, and I'm going through all of the evidence of my wife's deception. The thunder is getting louder outside. I turned on my laptop and began to go through the footage from earlier in the day. It felt like being in a spy movie. I watched and listened to events which had transpired just a few hours before, seeing my life from a different angle. I turned up the volume and listened to an exchange that had taken place in the kitchen this morning. "He has no idea," says Cecilia. "He's too busy with his stupid blueprints." He laughed. "You've always been good with people. It's not just Jonathan." She stops for a moment, and I can see her resting against our imported marble countertop. "Mark still believes he's unique. And James is practically asking for it." I jotted down another note in my journal, the storm outside growing louder, echoing the tempest in my mind. The security monitor on my desk showed all 27 cameras online. I had installed them over the past week, ensuring they covered every angle, every corner, every whisper of our home. It was a complex setup, but my experience in architecture made it easy to find the perfect spots. My phone chimed. A message from Mark. "Excited to see you both tonight? Cecilia told me she's wearing blue." I replied, "Yes, we'll be there." I switched the feed to our bedroom. There she was, slipping into the blue dress. I compared it to the footage from yesterday, where she wore the same dress during her meeting with Daniel in the pool house. It was right after her yoga class, and before I returned home from work. A soft knock on the door drew my attention. "Jonathan?" Cecilia calls from downstairs. "I'd like to get going." "Almost done with work, honey," I shout back. 5 minutes. Hearing her walk away, I go to the next recording. This one is from last weekend, out in the garden. James is speaking. "What about Jonathan?" "What about him?" Cecilia's laugh tinkles like broken glass. "He sees what he wants to see. They all do." I close the laptop and take off my headphones. Standing up, I go to the window and look outside. Lightning is crashing in the distance, but the rain hasn't started yet. The neighborhood looks perfect, pristine, as always. But I know it's not. A text comes through on my phone. It's from Rebecca Mills. "Meet me at 9 a.m. tomorrow. Bring everything." I type back, "I will." I go to my wall safe and take out a USB drive, putting it in my pocket. I'm going to add to my collection of evidence tonight. I have a feeling they'll be careless, thinking they've won. "Jonathan?" Cecilia repeats, a little more insistently. "We're going to be late." I adjusted my tie and looked at my face in the reflection of the window. Coming. I turned on the automated recordings for the night. They would do their job even when we weren't home, but the most interesting footage would be from the fundraiser itself. Cecilia was waiting for me in the hallway. She had put on a blue dress and a pearl necklace. It had been a gift from me. "You look beautiful," I say to her. I'm supposed to say that. "Thank you, honey." She straightens her dress. "You okay? You were in there for a while." "Just tying up some loose ends." I put her coat on. "Everything's going to work out just like I thought it would." "What Morrison project?" "Among others." I open the door, waving her inside. "Shall we?" Wouldn't want to keep everyone waiting. She was lit up by a bolt of lightning as we approached the car, and for an instant I saw her as she had been 15 years ago, young and innocent seeming. But then the image was gone. "I'll get us there," I say, opening her door. "It's getting bad out." She got in and adjusted her dress. "Daniel told me we might not have as many people tonight because of the weather." "Did he?" I turn the key in the ignition, and she seems to regret her mistake. "When did he tell you that?" At the board meeting." She faces the window. "Apparently, they're having trouble getting people to visit." As I drive out of the driveway, I can see the rain beginning to pour down outside. I think the people who should be there will be there. A few seconds later, my phone buzzes again. It's another recording being made back at our house. Just like that, I know that I will have plenty of evidence to confront him with when I get back tonight. Cecilia is about to turn on the radio, but I stop her. "We can watch the storm," I say. "That's kind of fun, right?" She sat back down in the passenger seat. "You seem a little off tonight. Am I?" I drive faster through the rain. Maybe I'm just waking up. Another flash of lightning and a rumble of thunder, and then I saw the museum up ahead. We'd be there soon. I reached into my pocket and felt for the USB drive, knowing it would be enough to show them the truth of it all. "Shh, sweetie," I say gently. "The rain's gonna come soon." It rained all night, and by morning the sky was blue. I had stayed up until sunrise, writing emails, making phone calls, and gathering evidence. Now I was standing outside the offices of Mills and Associates, wearing a suit and tie and holding a briefcase in my hand. The sign on the door said, "Rebecca Mills, attorney at law." I adjusted my tie, making sure the knot was straight, and walked inside. The carpet was thick beneath my feet, nearly silent. The receptionist eyed me, then said, "You must be Mr. Fisher," and called back to her boss to let her know I had arrived. Rebecca Mills rose from her chair and came around to greet me, shaking my hand with a firm grip. Her office was tasteful, but understated. "Jonathan, have a seat." She motions to a leather chair across from her. I put the briefcase on the desk and opened it up. "I have everything you asked for. I got your first report last night, very detailed." She leans back, adjusting her reading glasses. "Do you make a habit of documenting your day-to-day life?" "I'm an architect. Documentation is part of the job." "And the cameras?" "Last week, 27 of them. It is legal to have them in common areas of the house." She smiled. I see you've done your research. Good. That will make this a lot easier. I pulled the USB stick from my pocket and set it on the desk in front of her. I got some more insight into this at the fundraiser last night. Huh? She examines the drive, as if it's a foreign object. Cecilia had many suitors. Daniel, Mark, James, a whole host of gentlemen callers, some more so than others. Different people. That can be beneficial. She writes it down on her legal pad. And the assets? I pull a folder out of my briefcase. The house is in my name. I designed it. The investment portfolio is jointly held, but I've kept meticulous records of my contributions. The art collection... The wedding gifts will need to be factored in, she interrupts. Did you give her anything else? The pearl necklace she had on last night. Maybe some more jewelry. Nothing that would affect the settlement. She took off her glasses and looked at me. What's your plan, Jonathan? Discreet or conspicuous? I thought about last night. Cecilia's fake laugh. Her hand on his shoulder. His hand on her waist when he thought I wasn't looking. Specific? I eventually say. Specific, I say. Tidy, no mess. And the social destruction? Structural. I want it to be structural. She nodded. We need to move quickly. Shut down any joint accounts immediately and document everything. I assume you've already taken care of your personal finances? New accounts created last week. Private safety deposit box for essential documents. Great. She starts typing on the computer. Now, what happened last night? I need details. I told him about how I had set things up to see all of this, how I had made sure certain people heard certain things. Mark was especially hurt when he found out he wasn't the only Tuesday lunch, I say, chuckling a bit. Good. The more, the better. Less chance of an alliance. She opened a document on her computer. I'm working on a draft right now. We'll file on Monday. I want to prepare the chessboard first. And Cecilia will be served at the most opportune moment, maybe in the middle of her next museum board meeting, Rebecca says, with what sounds like admiration for my work. Did you say they're weekly? Thursdays at 2 p.m. Popular. Public, but not too public. Smart. She scribbles something down. And the house? We spent the next hour going through my plan, step by step, identifying its weak spots and how to turn the whole thing to my advantage. Rebecca was just as thorough as I had been, but her plan was much more efficient. One more thing, she says as I turn to go. The tapes. I stopped gathering my papers and said, yes, send more, but not everything. Sometimes the suggestion of proof is more compelling than the proof itself. Like negative space in architecture, I say, the absence is sometimes more significant than the presence. Exactly. She rises, offering her hand. I'll have a draft of our agreement by this afternoon. My assistant will be in touch. Just as she is about to leave, she turns back to me. Jonathan, when you get home, be cool, I know. I wrote this play, right? Making sure we have a strong foundation. I leave the room again. The carpet eats my footsteps. My phone vibrates in my pocket. It's Cecilia. Honey, are we having dinner together tonight? I could picture the look on her face as she typed it. Sure, I say. I'll book us a table at Maison. Dress nice. The elevator arrives, and I step inside. As I descend, I imagine how it works. Counterweights and cables. A delicate balance. Just like this plan. I'll see Cecilia again tonight. I'll watch her get dressed. I'll listen to her plans for the weekend. I'll smile, knowing that her life is as fragile as a house of cards, and that the only thing I need to do to bring it down is to blow on it. The dinner with Cecilia goes exactly as expected. It takes all evening. I drive home in a thunderstorm, and I fall asleep as soon as my head hits the pillow. The next day, I wake up early. I eat breakfast in the garden. The next morning, I sit in my garden with a cup of coffee in my hand. The sun is rising and the sky is painted in all colors. The air is fresh and damp after last night's rain. It's a perfect morning for a new beginning. On the table in front of me, I have lined up 5 envelopes, one for each of my children. I write the last name on the last envelope. Mrs. Catherine Grayson. Right on time. Could you send these out for me? First class, signature needed. I point to the envelopes. She came over and sat down next to me. Sure, what should I expect in the way of responses? Well, I expect we'll have some news by lunchtime. I sip my coffee. When you get back, we should talk about rescheduling some of next week's appointments. I have a feeling some of them will need to be canceled. Okay, sir. She picks up the envelopes as if they might explode at any moment. A text message arrived from Cecilia, just like every morning. Breakfast meeting with the museum board. Don't wait up. Have fun. Say hello to everyone from me, I replied. I placed the phone on the table and took another sip of my coffee. Across the street, Daniel's wife came out to pick up the morning paper. She was always up early, I noticed. I wondered when the envelope would arrive. Probably around noon, I thought. Daniel always had lunch meetings, or so he said. The sprinklers turned on. I always found it relaxing to watch them water the garden. They were programmed to turn on automatically at this time of day. I got another text. This one was from Mark. Something very interesting came through the mail today. Let's have a chat. I smiled into my coffee cup. My office, 11 a.m.? Do it somewhere more secluded. The club? Even better. The steam room. No one is ever there that late. I got up from my seat, trying to act like everything was normal. But what was normal for someone who was blowing up their entire social life on purpose? Sarah came back a few minutes later. I sent off those packages, Mr. Fisher. Oh, and Mrs. James called me and asked if you could meet her for lunch today instead of tomorrow. Oh? Did she really? That's nice. Here, take this empty cup. Tell her I'm busy until next week. She was very adamant. I'm sure she was. I'm going to be getting a lot of phone calls, so can you take messages for me? Thanks. I go into my office and turn on the monitors. The surveillance cameras show the exterior of our house and property. I hear a ding from my computer and check to see that I've got a new email. It's from James's wife. The subject line reads, "Urgent. Please call immediately." The security system shows motion from Daniel's house. When I click on the thumbnail, it shows Catherine walking around the kitchen with her phone in her hand, talking animatedly. I can't hear what she's saying, but she looks upset. The phone in my office rings, the first of many calls I'm sure I'll be getting today, and I let it go to voicemail. I'm busy typing another email. Would you like a refill, Mr. Fisher? Sarah enters the room. Yes, thank you. And Sarah, I think you should put the phone on Do Not Disturb for a while. I have a feeling we're about to get very occupied. She nodded, not asking any further questions. Should I cancel your dinner with Mrs. Fisher tonight? No, leave it. Some shows need a crowd. Once she's gone, I sit down in my study, staring at the design of a new building. As rumors and accusations begin to fly, I'll sit here, pretending to work, while the first dominoes fall. Another call, another email notification. Catherine Grayson gets into her car, crying. I watch it all on the security camera footage, right on time. I begin to draw on my computer, making a new design for a building. After all, you have to tear down the old one before you can build a new one. A few hours later, I show up to the gala at the art museum. Since I'd sent the emails and messages from earlier in the day, enough time had passed for the fallout to occur. By now, whispers would be spreading like wildfire among our friend group, and I could see the effects of my work already as soon as I walked in the door. The museum was extravagant, a rich person's playground. I stood by the bar, fiddling with my cufflinks while watching Cecilia work the room. She was a natural at this, but tonight there was a slight pause between each of her movements. Manhattan, neat, I order from the bartender, watching Daniel as he stands near Cecilia, always nearby but never directly engaging her. Jonathan. Mark sidles up next to me, looking less assured than normal. Quite the night we're having. Not for me. I was just checking out the new Wilson exhibit. The man took a sip of his scotch. She left rather suddenly. She got an email earlier today, she said. Oh, did she? That's too bad. I notice Cecilia's smile begin to fade as James's wife ignores her and walks in the opposite direction. Apparently she had a lot of emails to catch up on. Mark lowers his voice. Hey, Jonathan, did you know about the Tuesday meetings? I know about everything, Mark. I look him in the eyes. Including the Le Cirque reservations you made for lunch last month. He went pale. I need to... Look for your wife? Great idea. She's been standing over there watching us for the last 3 minutes. As Mark leaves, I notice that the crowd shifts a bit around Cecilia, and the murmur of voices that had followed him now follow her. Mr. Fisher. Rebecca Mills is suddenly beside me, wearing black silk. Quite a crowd. The museum board did a fine job with the invites. About that board. She indicates with a champagne glass to where Cecilia, in her blue dress, is left standing alone. You know, I say softly, she made them all feel special. Daniel, Mark, James, Colin. They all thought they were in on a secret. And now? And now they know they weren't. She laughs a little too loudly, and people standing nearby stop talking as they walk away. "Jonathan," she repeats, sounding a bit more anxious. "Sweetie, come see the new exhibit." "You should go," Rebecca says. "They're waiting for you." I walked across the marble floor, feeling all eyes on me, and took Cecilia's hand. "Everyone's being so weird tonight," she says. "Are they? I didn't notice." He looks like he's going to come over, but then his wife pulls on his arm and they walk in the opposite direction. "What did you say to Catherine?" Cecilia's nails puncture my sleeve. She hasn't returned my calls. Maybe she's preoccupied. I understand Tuesdays can be a hectic day. She froze. "What do you mean?" "Small talk, honey. Isn't that what this is all about?" I could hear the whispers around us again. All of them. Can you believe it? His own neighbor, too. Every Tuesday at 2 p.m., she tries to smile at everyone who passes her, but no one returns the gesture. A waiter she's known for years doesn't even look at her, and the director of the museum avoids her gaze. "Something's wrong," she whispers. "What did you say to him?" I gave him a few tips on architecture, how everything is connected, how one part relies on another. Daniel stood in front of us, looking far less confident than usual. "Cecilia, we should—" He turns to find me. "Jonathan, I was just—" "On your way out?" I offer kindly. "Your wife may need you. These soirees can be such an emotional drain." He backed away, looking at Cecilia one last time. "You're ruining this," she says, her facade starting to falter. "Oh, sweetie, I'm just letting the truth take the stage. You love being the star of the show, don't you?" The quartet begins to play a new song, and I feel Cecilia let go of my arm as Sophie James enters the room. "The nerve of you to come here," Sophie says, just loud enough to hear. "After what you did?" "Sophie, I don't know what you think I did," Cecilia says. "I think you did plenty. We all do." Sophie looks at me. Some of us just had the decency to prove it. She leaves Cecilia standing there, swaying a little, and the whispers are getting louder. People are moving away from her now, clearly trying to avoid her. "Take me home," Cecilia says, trembling. "Please." But the night's still young. I take a drink of my Manhattan. "And you've got a board meeting to prepare for, don't you? Tuesday's meeting is on Tuesday." Her mask falls away completely. "You planned this." "I'm an architect, Cecilia. I always have a blueprint. But I have to say, you were a marvelous foundation." Rebecca showed up just then. "Mrs. Fisher, can I have a word with you?" Cecilia looked at both of us, a knowing look on her face. Would you like to come with me to the director's office?" Rebecca asks, just being polite. "There are some documents that you need to sign." I watched them leave. Cecilia's blue dress, now a reminder of what she'd done. I could hear the whispers in the room getting louder as she walked away. Mark came up to me again. He looked furious. "Knowledge is like building a house, Mark. It's all about what you do with the scaffolding." The rest of the evening is an organized mess. People are humiliated and exposed in an orderly manner, in just the right order. I stay near the bar, drinking and watching the house of cards we have built over 15 years fall to the ground exactly as I had planned. Sarah texted me, "All files delivered. Camera feeds activated." "Good. Tell Rebecca I'll meet her at 9 o'clock tomorrow." The string quartet was still playing as the last of the lies that had been built up by my wife were demolished. It was a bit like a controlled demolition of a building, really. You remove the right parts of it, and gravity does the rest, just like a marriage. I took a taxi from the museum to my hotel. I had booked a room at the Four Seasons in advance, knowing I wouldn't be welcome back home. I slept well. Some people are afraid of the future. As an architect, you learn to plan for it. I took a shower and got dressed. I had brought extra clothes and all the necessary documents to the hotel. It's always good to be prepared. The morning after the museum fundraiser, I sit in the office of Marcus Chen at First National. The decor is old-fashioned, with wood-paneled walls and leather furniture, which somehow seems appropriate. "These are pretty big changes, Mr. Fisher," Marcus says, his fountain pen poised over the first form. "Suspension on all joint accounts?" "That's right, and new ones under my sole name." I looked out the window at the city, feeling less safe about standing in tall buildings than I had the day prior. "And Mrs. Fisher's access to the investment portfolio?" "Limited, according to our prenuptial agreement, Section 7.2. I hand him the document. My lawyer underlined the relevant sections. Marcus looked at the piece of paper, maintaining the same neutral expression, while the clock continued to tick in the background. "Everything seems fine," the man says at last. I do have to inform you, though, that this will send automatic emails to all involved parties. I know. He looks a little suspicious, but keeps working. It sounds like he's drawing new lines on a map. And you'll need to update your access to your safety deposit box, he says, pulling another form out and setting it in front of me. Just me, and I need to see it today. Yes, sir. He taps a button on his desk phone. Janet, can you get box 1547 ready for Mr. Fisher? I hear the intercom confirming, and a moment later my phone buzzes. It's Cecilia. Honey, something weird just happened. My card got declined at Bergdorf's. I let it ring. The wire transfers will be completed by the end of today, he continues, organizing some documents. The new accounts are ready for use. And the properties? They've been reassigned as per the paperwork from Miss Mills. He hesitates, considering. Mr. Fisher, if I may, we've known each other a long time, so I have to ask, are you sure this is what you want? I leaned forward, straightening a pen on his desk. Do you know what a moment frame is? I don't understand. The trick is to figure out where the stress points are, where it might bend, and if you can do that, I align the pen parallel to the edge of the desk. You can build around it. I got a text back from her a second later, saying, Is the money being transferred? Just packing up, I typed back. He cleared his throat. I'll need your signatures here, here, and here. He pointed to various spots with yellow tabs and initials on pages 4, 7, and 12. I signed the documents, feeling like I was signing my life away. Janet's going to take you to your safety deposit box, he says, getting to his feet. Anything else I can help you with? Yeah, I need to meet with your estate planning department. Can we set that up for next week? He nods. I'll have my assistant send you sometimes. Just then, Janet comes to the door with a key card in her hand. This way, Mr. Fisher. The vault level is made of concrete and steel. Janet's heels click and clack as she leads me to my safety deposit box. Stay as long as you like, she tells me, and steps outside. Inside the deposit box was everything I needed. Copies of the deeds, insurance policies, and USB drives with backup copies of everything on my home surveillance system. I added a few more items to the box, including an envelope addressed to Rebecca Mills that read, "To be opened only in the event of my death or disappearance." My phone buzzed again. This time it was Mark. My accounts. What did you do? Ask your wife about the Tuesday lunch receipts. I closed the safety deposit box and looked at myself in the mirror of the viewing room. I looked just the same as yesterday. And yet, I felt as if the outer layer of my skin had been removed, revealing the skeleton beneath. Janet took me back upstairs. As I left the bank, I passed a woman who was arguing with a teller about her credit card being declined. It was only a matter of time before the entire city would be affected by my little stunt. Outside, I felt the warmth of the sun on my skin. I had 7 missed calls from Cecilia, 3 from Daniel, and 1 from James. Everything was going according to plan. They would all respond in predictable ways, and I would take advantage of it. I checked the time on my phone. There was still time to drive to the office before Cecilia found out that her phone was useless. I wanted to see the look on her face when she realized that she had no one to call. I was looking forward to it. 2 weeks passed by in a blur. The evidence I had gathered at the bank was only a small part of what I needed to take down Cecilia and the entire company. I had to be patient and wait for the right moment to strike. And when that moment came, I was ready. It was a cold December morning when we finally stood in front of the judge in the county courthouse. The courtroom was illuminated by the morning sun, casting long shadows on the floor. I adjusted my tie and watched Rebecca Mills standing up next to me. Cecilia sat on the other side of the room, wearing the blue dress I had given her. Your Honor, Rebecca starts, with that beautiful mix of command and control. Exhibit A. The projector whirred to life, and footage of the pool house was shown on the screen. It looked like it was from a couple weeks back, on a Tuesday afternoon. It showed Daniel and Cecilia entering and then leaving. Object, Cecilia's lawyer begins. Overruled, Judge Harrison cuts in. The video was captured in communal areas of the home. I look at Cecilia's hand. 3 rows behind her sits Catherine Grayson, her wedding ring missing. The time, Rebecca adds, matches up with when Mrs. Fisher is allegedly at yoga. In the museum, Mark shifts uncomfortably. I see his wife grab him by the arm. Additionally, Rebecca moves to another slide. We have evidence of several illegal withdrawals from joint accounts. It's all there in the documents, the proof of what he's saying. Your Honor, Cecilia's lawyer rises. My client disputes the meaning of these The meaning? Rebecca's smile is a feat of engineering. Maybe we should call Mr. James Roberts to the stand to get his take on what he and Cecilia discussed at their Tuesday lunches. James goes white. His wife gasps. Miss Mills, Judge Harrison cuts in, can you please move on to the financial records? Rebecca went to the next slide. And account transfers starting 6 months ago showing systematic withdrawal. Cecilia began to look more and more worried with each new piece of information about her. Her friends began to turn their backs on her. Mr. Fisher, Judge Harrison interrupts my thoughts. Can you come up here for a second? I got up, walked over to the bench. Yes? This surveillance setup is a little much, don't you think? Well, I'm an architect, Your Honor. We like to keep records. Someone laughs behind me. Okay. He gestures for me to sit back down. Rebecca continued presenting the evidence. It all fit together nicely, like a construction set. Cecilia's lawyer tried to object a few times, but without any success. And now, Rebecca continues, I want to talk about the museum board fund inconsistencies. Cecilia's head shot up. You wouldn't. Mrs. Fisher, Judge Harrison interjects. If you want to speak to the court, you must do so through your attorney. It's like watching a building collapse in a controlled demolition. Board meeting minutes, falsified financial records, secret bank accounts. Sophie James stands up and leaves. 3 other board members follow her. The prosecution will now present Exhibits C through F, Rebecca says, which show Mrs. Fisher's repeated exploitation of different individuals for money. I get a text from Sarah saying the cameras are still on at the office. I think about the fact that the cameras are still on in my house as well. Your Honor, Cecilia's lawyer is on his feet again. I'd like to request a short recess to examine these new documents. Request denied. Miss Mills, please proceed. The day goes on, and with each new piece of evidence against her, I see Cecilia's shoulders sink a little lower. And lastly, Rebecca says, we have Mr. Daniel Grayson's account of his time with Mrs. Fisher. Daniel isn't physically present in the courtroom. His voice is heard through a recorded testimony and through a few videos, but that's it. I guess he wanted to make this as difficult as possible for me. Cecilia looks at me for the first time upon hearing this. I look back at her, and I think she finally starts to understand the full extent of my plan. You set all this up, she nearly shouts in her whisper, from the start. Mrs. Fisher, the Judge Harrison says, please do not speak to the defendant. Rebecca finishes her presentation, delivering the final blow to our marriage. With all the proof presented, Judge Harrison issues his verdict, and the sheer volume of reports of bad behavior. Cecilia is losing her friends one by one. People are leaving her, turning their backs on her. Finally, the judge said, divorce granted, all terms accepted as presented. Everyone stood up. Cecilia sat still. Rebecca packed up her papers. Congrats, she says to me. Straight lines just like you asked. I glanced at my phone, saw another message from Sarah, and read it. All done. And I put the new blueprints on your desk. I stood up, put on my jacket, and picked up my briefcase. The courtroom had changed during the last few minutes. The light was different, the shadows longer. I was about to walk out the door when I heard Cecilia's voice behind me. She didn't sound like herself. Jonathan? What? Was any of it real? I think about buildings which look solid but are on the verge of collapse. Well, I say at last, I think that depends on your definition of real. I stepped into the hallway, leaving her behind in the courtroom as the bailiff ushered everyone out. My phone began to buzz with messages from Rebecca, asking what to do with the money, what to change her name to, and so on. A whole new life was about to begin, and I had always been very good at starting new things. The doors to the courthouse closed behind me, and I was standing in the main hallway. It was quiet, and the tall windows let the sun in. It was almost beautiful. I took it all in for a few moments, then moved on. There was work to be done. The courthouse doors closed behind me with a soft thud. Afternoon sunlight fills the building, casting long shadows on the floor. I walk down the stairs, my footsteps echoing in the empty foyer. Rebecca joins me at the bottom, her heels clicking on the tile floor. The judge's decision was better than expected, she says. You got full control over his assets, ownership of the house, and the NDA. As planned, I reply, tightening my tie against the fall wind. You are very relaxed after destroying your life. I stop at the bottom of the stairs and stand there for a moment, people flowing around us like water around pylons. In order to build something new, you must first tear down what was there before. My phone vibrates again. It's Sarah. Legal papers have been filed. Your office has been cleared out and reorganized according to your instructions. Through the glass doors of the courthouse, I catch a glimpse of Cecilia's blue dress. The sun is reflected in it, but the light doesn't seem as bright as it did before. Her lawyer must have left her side. She's staring at her phone, most likely having just found out that her cards have been blocked. Jonathan? Rebecca interrupts my thoughts. The reporters will arrive shortly. It's time to go. Let them arrive. I have no secrets. She smiled. No, you don't. That was the idea, wasn't it? At that moment, a town car pulled up and a driver got out, opening the door for us. Here's your car, Mr. Fisher. Just a sec. I want to see Cecilia come out of the courthouse. She pauses at the top of the stairs, looking distressed as she sees her own ride has been canceled. She looks over at me, and for a second, I think she finally understands the full extent of my plan. You were never going to divorce me, she shouts after me from the square. You were going to eliminate me. No, Cecilia. You eliminated yourself. I only wrote it down. A few people are gathered around, filming with their phones, one of them whispering, Isn't that the treasurer of the museum board? Jonathan, Rebecca said, touching my arm. The car. Of course. I look away from Cecilia's deteriorating face and hop into the vehicle. I see her take out her phone, trying to call Mark or Daniel or James, but they're all receiving their own revelations today. Drive, I say to the driver. As we drove away, I got a few messages confirming my suspicions that some of the information had been leaked to the public. Nice work, Rebecca says next to me. The security camera bit was a nice touch. Hey, buildings aren't one-dimensional. You gotta get different angles. She looked at her tablet for a moment and then said, Catherine Grayson just filed for divorce, and it looks like Daniel's assets are already frozen. And Mark? His wife's lawyer has the evidence package. We should see a filing from him in the next hour. The city rolled by. I could see the buildings I had worked on, the places I had designed. My phone vibrated again, a lawyer trying to set up a meeting regarding James's wife. Where are we going? He asks. To the office, I say. I have some blueprints to look at. New story? A few. I don't know. It feels nice to have a fresh start. A moment later, the car turned onto Madison Avenue. You know, Rebecca says, in 15 years of being a lawyer, I've never seen anyone plan their divorce quite this diligently. Most people design rooms to keep people in. I just design rooms for people to leave. I received another text message. It was from the president of the board of directors. Right on time, I say. You knew they would be checking the books today? I knew they would have to, once some of the transactions were made known. We pull up outside the office building, and I can see Sarah through the lobby windows, organizing files on her desk. Tomorrow, then? Rebecca says, grabbing her stuff. To finalize everything? 9 a.m. I have a meeting with a couple who lost their house at 10. She chuckled. You never stop designing, do you? Why the fuck would I do that? It's what I do best. I walk outside, feeling the warmth of the sun on my face. I look up at the glass and steel towers rising above me. These buildings won't collapse. They are built to last, to withstand the test of time. My phone vibrates one last time. Cecilia, realizing she can't access our house anymore. I ignore it and put it back in my pocket. I have more important things to do. I have a new design to look at, and the day is still young. By the time I leave the building again, the sun is high on the sky. I have to shield my eyes from the blinding light reflected in the glass facades of the skyscrapers. I look up at the top of one of them, following its smooth surface all the way up to the top. I take the elevator up to the 20th floor, where I have my office. From here, I can see the whole city. It's only been 3 hours since I left the house, but I've already had several meetings and phone calls. Now it's time to get some real work done. The doors open to show that we have arrived at my floor. Sarah's desk is empty, as it should be. The late afternoon sun is casting long shadows across the floor. It looks like a perfect day to start over. I stop at the door to my office and admire how everything is back in its place. My drafting table is clean, with a new stack of blueprints ready to be worked on. My computer screens are turned on, but the surveillance footage is gone. I won't need that anymore. My phone vibrates one last time. I take a look at the message and see that it's from Daniel's wife's lawyer. Thank you for the documentation. We'll proceed accordingly. Rebecca is still talking in the conference room. I'll messenger over the last documents to you first thing in the morning. Good morning. I say, placing my briefcase on the credenza. I have the Westbrook couple coming in at 10. She stood in my doorway, holding a tablet under her arm. After they collapsed themselves? Something like that. I nudge a slightly askew pencil on my desk. Except their implosion wasn't as structurally sound as ours. On the subject of sound, she glances at her tablet. The museum board meeting just ended. Emergency audit passed with a full vote. I walked over to the window and looked out at the city. And Cecilia? On leave for now, until they overturn your findings, but I don't think they'll be able to locate all the concealed bracing you logged. They'll find some of it. She approached me and said, most people have a hard time dealing with the after effects. You do feel lighter? I look at my reflection in the black screen of the computer. In architecture, it is taught that empty space is just as important as space that is occupied. And what will occupy this space? I nodded towards my drafting table, where the blueprints for the new buildings were laid out. You don't mind that I completely K.O. it? A quick image of her standing alone on the steps of the courthouse in that blue dress, watching her life fall apart. You can't build on a lie. All right, my work here is done, Rebecca said. Unless you want to blow up something else, of course. No one right now, but I think Catherine Grayson might be looking for a new one. She called me earlier today. She heads for the door, standing in the doorway for a moment. Take some time to relax, Jonathan. You deserve it. Once she was gone, I sat back down in my chair, getting comfortable in the leather seat. I woke up the computer and opened up my drafting program, ready to start designing something new. The sun was just beginning to set outside the window. I heard Sarah's voice one last time on the intercom saying, "Everything is locked up, Mr. Fisher. Anything else before I go?" "Yes, Sarah. Thank you. Tomorrow." The silence returned, and I picked up a pencil, beginning to sketch out a new set of blueprints on a fresh piece of paper. Before my phone died, a message came in from Cecilia. "You didn't just design a divorce. You designed an extinction." I smiled and went back to my work. There was always a new project.
All right, everyone's presentations are done. Nick, the manager, said as he tried to move the discussion forward. Excuse me, I haven't. I recently found out something. Nick interrupted me and began to speak. There's apparently someone in this department who didn't graduate high school and is just a part-timer. Meetings should be for employees only. Absolutely right. His lackey, Mike, of course, agreed with Nick. I'm leaving. After leaving the meeting room, I started to shut down my computer. I noticed that an email had arrived, not in my personal inbox, but in the company's shared email. Thinking, there's no point in speaking up, no one will listen, I went home quietly. The next day, I heard a commotion from Nick's desk. He was staring at his computer screen, his face pale. Nick? Is something wrong? Mike looked at the screen with him. And he turned even paler than Nick. Why is he so angry? Knowing the reason for Mike's distress, I thought to myself, serves them right. My name is Adam. My mother passed away when I was in the 9th grade, and I was raised by my father. Well, you could hardly call it being raised. After my mother passed, my father changed. He drowned his sorrows in alcohol, and though he still went to work, he squandered our living expenses on horse racing. Because of that, I had to start working part-time as soon as I entered high school. Every month, I went to the convenience store with bills in hand that couldn't be auto-deducted from my father's account. Even though I endured it because I didn't want to be alone, I reached my limit in my second year of high school and dropped out. I found a live-in job at a distant inn. Thank you for everything. The day I left home, my father, still staring at the TV, spoke. Take care. That was our last conversation. Back then, 18 wasn't the age of majority, so I needed my father's permission to work, and I couldn't hide my place of employment. Yet, my father never visited me even once. I kept working just to survive, and before I knew it, I was 42. Years of hard work paid off, and I was transferred to the headquarters. I was thrilled to be recognized by the company, as I thought I'd be working in the field until retirement due to my lack of formal education. Listen up. Our work can change the future of our employees. Don't drag us down. On my first day after the transfer, Nick, dressed in an expensive suit, spoke sternly. There was a reason for this. Our inn was located in a prominent tourist destination, known so well that everyone in the state could sing its commercial jingle. At its peak, We had 5 locations within the state. But that was long ago. Due to financial difficulties and aging facilities, only the place where I had worked for many years and the original establishment remained. I was prepared to lose my job anytime, but now there was a glimmer of hope. With the rise of social media, the tourist area where the inn was located started gaining attention again. Depending on how hard the sales department, where I was transferred, worked, we could either thrive or be forced to give up this prime location to the new hotel chains continuously popping up. For Nick, who had switched careers from another industry to strengthen our sales, this was a battle he couldn't afford to lose. I understood why he had to be strict. "I will do my best." Nick sneered at my enthusiastic declaration. "Did you not hear what I said?" "I'm sorry. I thought I was listening carefully." Out of habit from years of customer service, I apologized reflexively, though I had no idea what had offended him. Someone was watching me with a smirk. In this department, there are those who are expected to excel and those who have been shoved here because they have nowhere else to go. You are the latter. It was Mike, the section chief. He's 7 years younger, at 35. But he was called to headquarters much earlier than I was and had been moving around within the headquarters ever since. I'm not jealous, but I can't accept that he's my boss. Graduating from a prestigious university, he has an unusually high pride and caused many problems as a newbie, making things very difficult for me when I was the front desk leader. When I found out Mike was transferred to the sales department a month before me, I was disheartened. Mike is right. With just a middle school diploma, there's not much you can do. Don't even think about achieving results. As if I didn't exist, Nick remarked, "I'm thirsty." Mike eagerly ran to the coffee maker. It seems Mike is Nick's lackey. I regretted being happy about my transfer to headquarters, wishing I had stayed on site forever. Send a direct mail to every company on this list by the end of the day. Nick only assigned me tasks that even a new graduate could handle. What? There are over 1,000 companies. You want me to send to all of them by today? Yes, if you and your fellow misfits split the work, even those with nowhere else to go should finish by today. I glanced at the employees typing away expressionlessly. They were worn out from customer service, only thinking about leaving on time, or were women reassigned after having children, with zero motivation for work. Even Sam, a new graduate from the same university as Mike, who was supposed to be among the expected achievers, had no enthusiasm for the job, having joined the company wanting to do customer service. "I don't care what they say, I plan to quit any time," he said. Only Nick and Mike were highly motivated, making all the decisions between the two of them. I originally only wanted to work at the inn to survive and had no particular attachment to this job. I swallowed my words, thinking I had no right to reprimand them. About a month after the transfer, Nick told us with a frustrated look. "To commemorate the 50th anniversary, we've decided to create a plan exclusive for one group per day. Originally, Mike and I were supposed to come up with it, but our president, Mr. Thompson, insists on hearing everyone's opinions. So, you all get a chance." As Nick explained, Mike began handing out prints. Make sure not to embarrass Nick. If your ideas are half-baked, you'll have to redo them. It seemed that they had printed his handwritten notes by Mr. Thompson, which included several questions and a section for free responses. It made sense why Nick had to seek our input, given that all responses had to be submitted to Mr. Thompson. We were given a week to think about it, and a meeting was scheduled to compile our ideas. My plan is to let guests enjoy both the old and modern America. Nick began the presentations. Guests would watch a master confectioner at a nearby traditional sweet shop make sweets in front of them. The welcome drink would be premium tea in a bottle. Nick's plan was certainly attractive. After his presentation, Nick called on us to present in the order we were seated. Just as I stood up for my turn. "All right, everyone's presentations are done." "Excuse me, I haven't. I recently found out something." Nick interrupted me. "There's someone in this department who didn't graduate high school and is just a part-timer." He was likely talking about me. I joined the company as a part-timer and was made a full-time employee when I turned 20. That was 20 years ago, so Nick and Mike probably had no chance to know until recently. Meetings should be for employees only. Absolutely right. After that, Nick kept creating opportunities to solicit everyone's opinions, purposefully excluding me from speaking. The meeting unexpectedly heated up and went past the scheduled end time. A few people asked to leave, and the discussion continued with the remaining few. Still here? Normally, you'd leave in that situation. Though I had no attachment to the job initially, hearing kind words from customers made me want to make them happier. For someone like me, with nowhere to go, the inn was my home and customer service was my life. I felt pathetic about my current self. I'm leaving. I left the conference room and started shutting down my computer. I noticed an email had arrived, not in my personal inbox, but in the company's shared email. Thinking no one would listen to what I had to say anyway, I quietly went home. The next day, while preparing the DM as instructed, I heard a commotion from Nick's desk. In his haste to stand up, he hit his knee on the desk. He stared at his computer screen, his face pale. "Nick! What's wrong?" Mike, thinking he should be the first to rush over, approached Nick while still wearing his coat. He peered at the screen with Nick. And he turned even paler than Nick. Why is he so angry? Who is responsible for this company? Nick, more irritated than ever, asked, and Mike answered without checking. Probably Sam. Sam wasn't there because he was attending a morning training session for new hires. Nick gave up on getting angry and returned his gaze to the screen. They were looking at an email that arrived right after the end of the working day yesterday. Apparently, no one, including me, had checked it before leaving. The email was from a large company that used us for their annual employee trips. The president and executives of that company also frequently used our services personally. President of the company, Mr. Mason himself, had declared that neither he nor his company would ever use our services again. Well, some companies cancel their employee trips or stop using our services due to financial struggles. Let's just move on. Mike kept wiping the sweat from his forehead with a handkerchief. Knowing why Mike was so agitated, I quietly watched their interaction. Do you know how much revenue we get from that company? We can find other guests to fill the rooms, but we'll lose the banquet costs, gift shop revenue, rental car fees, and more. Moreover, the gifts were supposed to be prepared by the traditional confectionery shop involved in Nick's proposed plan. If it's known that we incurred such a huge loss at this critical time, Nick's position in the company would be jeopardized. Nick took a deep breath, seemingly trying to calm himself. All right, Mike. Go to New York right now and apologize to Mr. Mason. What? You're coming with me, right? I have urgent work to do. I trust you, which is why I'm entrusting this to you. Please. Mike, believing Nick's sincerity, agreed with a determined look on his face, saying, yes. That's Nick for you. Even if Mike went to apologize, Nick would shift all the blame onto him if the client didn't change their mind. Well, it was Mike's fault to begin with, so it served him right. About 3 hours later, Sam answered a call from somewhere and repeatedly apologized, saying, I'm very sorry. Everyone watched to see what was happening. After ending the call, he informed Nick with a weary tone. When Mike arrived at the client's company, he only made things worse, further infuriating Mr. Mason. He was demanding, get his boss here immediately. It was no wonder Sam was exhausted, dealing with such a call right after returning from training. What is that idiot doing? All right, Adam, you're coming with me. If sacrificing Mike didn't work, then I must be next. Normally, I'd want to refuse at all costs, but I saw an opportunity in this situation. If I can be of assistance, I'd be happy to join you. I obediently followed Nick, and we flew to New York. When we introduced ourselves at the reception, it became clear how serious the situation was, as the receptionist personally escorted us to the president's office. Angry voices leaked through the door, making both Nick and me uneasy. Excuse me. I'm Nick, the supervisor. I understand my subordinate has caused you trouble, and I deeply apologize. Nick, with his experience in the corporate world, knew enough to offer an apology before excuses. However, his customer service skills left much to be desired. I sighed as I saw Mike trembling like a small dog in the corner of the room. What kind of training are you giving your subordinates? Mr. Mason glared at Nick with a red face. The intensity of his gaze made even Nick take a step back. Regrettably, I joined this company only 2 years ago and was unaware of Mike's issues. I should have identified his shortcomings sooner. Indeed. I should have realized sooner. No sensible person would come to apologize and then give a lengthy presentation on the drawbacks of not using therein. Nick froze, his mouth slightly open. Suspecting the worst, I picked up the documents that had fallen to the floor. It seemed Mike hastily prepared these documents on the plane, listing the disadvantages. Disadvantage 1: if you change the venue for the company trip, employees might suspect it's for cost-cutting reasons, leading to a negative impression. Reading it aloud half-jokingly, Nick snatched the papers from my hand and checked the contents with a furious expression. Among the stack of documents was a receipt from a nearby convenience store's copy machine. I felt a pang of dread, hoping he hadn't shown the receipt as well. What do you think he said when I asked what kind of nerve he had to do this? I'm very sorry. Faced with the dire situation, Nick must have thought there was nothing left to do but apologize. In a voice smaller than I'd ever heard from him, he uttered words of apology. He said, "I'm a Harvard graduate. I don't believe I said anything wrong." Mike! What have you done? Forgetting his plan to pin the blame on Mike, Nick yelled loudly, even in front of Mr. Mason. "I didn't do anything wrong." "You're still saying that? Look at him." Mike pointed at me with a shaking hand. "I was assigned to headquarters in my 20s and now I'm a section chief. This guy only made it to headquarters at 42. Everything I've done proves I was right. So why are we losing the contract?" Having said his piece, Mike collapsed to the floor. "Of course. You were sent there because you had nowhere else to go." Mike never expected to hear such words from someone he looked down upon. He lunged at me, and Nick hurriedly stepped in to stop him. "Mr. Thompson told me Mike is a quick thinker, and to take good care of him." There's no way he was pushed aside. "Don't make things worse here." "He didn't say quick thinker, he said only quick-witted, didn't he?" I don't remember that part." I recalled the many troubles Mike caused when he was a newbie. When Mike was on the front line, his pride was so high that he never apologized to customers. Customer service, especially in our job, doesn't work alone. It brings both good and bad situations. If the front staff or housekeepers made mistakes, or the cleaning company didn't properly clean a room, one had to apologize to the customers regardless of personal fault. Mike, in such situations, would never apologize, insisting he wasn't at fault. This often angered customers, and as the front desk leader, I frequently had to apologize on his behalf. He caused complaints and disrupted operations, which is why he was quickly moved to headquarters. In departments where he didn't interact directly with customers, his quick thinking was beneficial and things went well. But it seemed his flaws were starting to show. Corporate reservations are supposed to be entered into the system by the sales representative. But a quick check yesterday revealed that more than 10 items were missing from the client's reservation. The handover document clearly stated what needed to be prepared. Why didn't you enter it into the system? Why do we have to give them special treatment? Filling rooms near the banquet hall, setting up all the food in advance. Specifying the brand of wine, they're too demanding. No wonder he always angered customers, I thought, feeling a headache coming on. Grouping them in rooms near the banquet hall is for our benefit too. It makes it easier for the staff to set up beds and serve breakfast since everyone's schedule is synchronized. As for the other requests, Mr. Mason suggested them to lighten our load. I didn't know that. Nick finally seemed to realize that Mike was the one who had angered the client. What did you say to them? I just told them we wouldn't give them special treatment anymore. We shouldn't waste effort on things that don't bring in money. I was utterly exasperated at his lack of understanding of customer service. Of course, we shouldn't comply with unreasonable demands. But carrying over successful practices from past stays makes customers feel remembered and enhances their experience. Good memories encourage repeat visits. That's part of our job. I looked down at Mike, who was sitting on the floor. In our job, nothing is a waste. Mr. Thompson likely moved you to the sales department, hoping you'd finally understand this. How do you think he feels now that you've failed to meet his expectations? Mike, tears in his eyes, fled the president's office. I was amazed he still hadn't apologized. You have it tough, Adam. It's okay, we're all employees of the same company. I deeply apologize for this disrespectful incident. Especially after all the care you've shown us. If it weren't for you, Adam, I really would have stopped staying here. When I heard you were moving to the sales department, I was willing to reconsider if you handled it. Seeing us talk so amicably, Nick's face contorted. Do you two know each other? Adam's service is excellent. I always requested him specifically. Normally, we don't accept specific staff requests, but we made an exception for Mr. Mason, adjusting my shifts accordingly. He had personally stayed at our hotel just before my transfer, and during casual conversation, I mentioned, I'm moving to the sales department soon. If I hadn't told him then, things could have been much worse. Please continue to take care of us. I look forward to it. On the return flight, Nick awkwardly offered me a can of beer. It's still working hours. Of course, I had no intention of forgiving him for a single beer. Nick might try to pin everything on Mike and avoid any consequences. While pondering this, a startling fact came to light. Nick, the tea bottles for the plan have arrived. I handed Nick a bottle labeled with our inn's name. They look good. What are you talking about? These are plastic bottles. I had assumed we would use the trendy, high-end bottling tea. But what arrived were ordinary plastic bottles of tea with customized labels. The only unique aspect was the label, which had the inn's name, making it look customized. Upon further investigation, I discovered that a substantial amount of money was set to be paid to the tea company. It was priced like bottling tea. Does this plastic bottle really cost $100 each? The tea inside is specially blended for us. The extra cost is for that. Wouldn't it be better to use another tea company? Or is there a specific reason we must use this one? As Nick continued to make excuses, I showed him a printed email. I informed the tea company's president, Mr. Mitchell, that we discovered irregular payments and he confessed. He said you two were high school classmates and planned to split the extra money. That idiot. Why did he confess? That's not important. You should worry about yourself, this could turn into a police matter. Opening the bottle cap, I suggested. How about calming down with this tea? It supposedly has a relaxing effect. Nick drank the tea frantically. In the following days, decisions were made about their fates. Mike was reassigned to the General Affairs Department, with no chance of transfer or promotion, as per Mr. Thompson's orders. As for Nick, since the payment to the tea company hadn't yet been made, he narrowly avoided legal trouble. Instead, he was encouraged to leave the company, and to avoid further complications, Nick submitted his resignation. Rumor has it that connections between HR departments have made it difficult for him to find new employment. Even though it was good to have those two gone, something unexpected happened in the sales department. Everyone became motivated and united in refining the 50th anniversary plan. In the end, my plan was adopted. We collaborated with the Tourist Information Center to provide personalized guides. The plan, tailored to the number of guests, was truly special for the 50th anniversary. Hey, is Adam's family coming to stay? I immediately booked that special plan for my family. Sam noticed it on the reservation list and quickly picked up on it. Yes, I'm inviting my father. That's great. I might invite my parents too. I lacked the courage to face my father just as Adam. But here, with the confidence Mr. Mason praised, I felt ready. The 50th anniversary plan was a perfect opportunity to reconnect with my father. I hoped to bring back the days when we could laugh together as we once did.